Hello from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. My name is Dr. Susan Hoban. I'm a senior research scientist at the Goddard Earth Science and Technology Center. And I'm here with my friend and colleague this evening, Dr. Ann Spence, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. Hi, Ann.
Hi, it's nice to have you with me this evening.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So they've asked us to talk a little bit about the fact that you're here in mechanical engineering, you're an assistant professor. There are not a lot of females in that position, so I'm interested in knowing how you got from there to here.
That's a long story. It goes way back. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, and I had, back when I was growing up, we didn't have all of the kinds of things around us we do today. We didn't have a lot of television. We certainly didn't have cell phones and computers. Those didn't come till much later. So a lot of the things I did when I was growing up were a little bit different. They didn't involve electronics. I remember one of my first toys certainly had a baby doll, but I also had a red dump truck that had a dumping action to it, right? So of course, the most fascinating thing to me was to be able to put my doll in the red dump truck, roll her down the hill, and dump her out.
How did you get to have a red dump truck?
That's a good question. Most girls have dolls.
Yeah.
They don't have trucks. But my mom and dad thought it was good that girls had not only dolls, but had something else that, cars, trucks, devices like that. So it was unusual for me to have that. But I enjoyed it. I think learning about the action of that was fascinating to me. So I liked taking care of my doll, but I also liked to see what the action was on the dump truck.
So by the time you get to high school, are you thinking about being an engineer or?
Yeah, that's a good question because at one point I wanted to be an astronaut. I don't know. Does every girl want to be an astronaut? Who knows? I wanted to be an astronaut. And then the more I took science and math classes, I really liked math. I was always good at math, and I enjoyed it. I never felt like girls shouldn't be doing math. I always thought, this is something I can do. And in high school, people said, oh, you like math, you should be a computer scientist. So I said, okay, I'll go to college, I'll be a computer scientist. And I graduated from high school and went to college and did a year of computer science and absolutely hated it. It was not what worked for me. It was not the way my mind worked. And I spent the summer after my freshman year working at the David Taylor Naval Ship Research and Development Center down in Carter Rock. So small town Missouri girl moves to the East Coast and works for the Navy for a summer. And in that summer, I got to try out a lot of different things. I was hired as a computer science intern, but the work I was doing was actually engineering work. So I was able to go to the wind tunnel, test models in the wind tunnel, collect the data, and then make a computer model of the data. So I liked having the computer help me to solve problems. That seemed to be a good use for a computer and for my computer science abilities at that time.
How about your dad? He sort of had an interesting hobby that, if I remember correctly, you got to partake in.
Yes, my dad was a pilot, just for fun. He liked to fly small aircraft, and so we had always had access to an airplane. We didn't have one ourselves. We were partners in an airplane. And so ever since I was probably, since I was in elementary school, I was going out with him and going flying with him.
So you went as a computer scientist, but you changed to engineering?
Yeah, I changed to engineering. In fact, that summer, I'd been talking to my dad about I wanted to change, and I said, will you talk to me about aerospace engineering? And he said, no. You need to go talk to someone else because I don't want to influence you. I don't want you to choose this because you think I want you to choose this. So I ended up going and talking to some of the other faculty, but I pretty much knew that the aerospace engineering really was something that was fascinating to me. And as soon as I switched into it, and at that point, I hadn't really thought about graduate school. It was all about getting that undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering and then going to work. So I had my first opportunity after grad school to go work for Bell Helicopter.
After grad school or after?
Before grad school, sorry.
Okay.
After undergrad and before grad school, I went to Bell. I had my bachelor's degree, and I got to do a lot of different things there. I got to do some flight testing work, so I would go out and work on the helicopters, have the pilots fly different kinds of maneuvers and take data and analyze the data. I had the opportunity to work in the simulator and create the software that flew the simulator to make sure it really simulated actual flight. While I was there, I really started thinking a lot about the fact that when I was an undergraduate, there were no women faculty in front of my classroom.
Right.
The only ones were in psychology or history or English. And while it didn't impact me a lot, I also always felt very confident in what I was doing. I think my parents had always made me feel confident. There were a lot of other women who started out with me that didn't feel so confident, and they ended up switching out of engineering and into something else. And I wondered if there had been somebody that looked like them up in front of the classroom, if that would have been different for them. And so I decided while I was working on my master's, I really wanted to get a PhD in aerospace engineering and be that faculty member in front of the classroom, encouraging women to go into engineering or whatever, science, engineering, mathematics field they might feel so inclined to pursue.
So it seems like there's a couple of things going on here. The idea of being a role model, that's important, and that was driving you. But also this idea of being able to do really cool things.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And when I applied to a number of graduate schools and picked the University of Maryland down, our southern school, College Park, and I picked that place to go because they did a lot of work in rotorcraft. And while I was there, I got a great rotorcraft fellowship down there and was able to do research for them. But another thing I did down there was I started a Women in Non-Traditional Graduate Studies group. WINGS. What else would you call it, okay? Something, and it was open to all women. We really aimed it at women in engineering, but it was open to women in some of the physical sciences, computer science, mathematics, but it tended to be more engineering women. And the idea there was to help us kind of network. To be supportive to each other. We also gave each other opportunities to present our research in front of a group that was a friendly group.
Right.
And it was a good place to present initially and to kind of get some feedback before they went to a conference or something like that. And I'm not sure if the organization is still going today, but I do know that they have a Women in Engineering program down there that's very strong, that's really working on keeping women and getting women into engineering. So I worked down there, finished my PhD. I was 8.5 months pregnant when I defended my dissertation.
Gracious, that's called getting in under the wire.
And it was in under the wire, and most of the faculty didn't quite know what to do with a woman who was pregnant getting her degree. That seemed odd to them, but I said, women do a lot rougher things than this. And so I finished that, and I was able then to teach a little bit. And what I really started thinking about, after I completed my PhD, and my PhD work was in aeromechanical stability of hingeless rotor systems in turning flight. So it was very mathematically oriented. We wanted to see if helicopters in high G maneuvers were going to have any issues with the rotor systems. And, that was the work I did. I started teaching helicopter aerodynamics. I started teaching freshman engineering design. And it was at that point that I realized not only is it important to have the women in the classroom when they get to the university level, but we also need to get them to the university. And that's where I started doing my research in the area of STEM education for K-12. So kindergarten through 12th grade, and of course we could really extend it PK-20, pre-K through grade 20 through graduate school, and starting to look at what is it that we need to do to get more kids into STEM?
And STEM, for our friends who may not know that acronym.
That's right. It's not STEM cells.
Right.
Okay. It stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I'm sure folks have heard a lot lately about how we're falling behind. We're not as innovative as we have been in the past. And the idea of creating more students to graduate and take STEM jobs is really important. And we can't necessarily do that the way we've done it before. So we need to start thinking out of the box and thinking about other ways of getting non-traditional populations, as well as kids who never thought about engineering as a field, ways of getting them to come into STEM areas.
So this is where I think this conversation really gets interesting, because we get to see how those unusual experiences you had when you were younger affect what you do here at UMBC.
Right, right. And a lot of my experiences were kind of being innovative and creating things and thinking about what I needed, what were the things I had available to me? How could I solve this problem? So it kind of extends into what we do in STEM education. You know, we don't have students here. How do we get more students into the program? And it's not just saying, oh, this is what engineering is. As a mechanical engineer, you can build cars. Right. Well, yes, you can build cars, but you can also do a lot of more fascinating things. You can do things like creating wind energy systems that's going to get rid of that reliance that we have on fossil fuels. It's the idea of creating prostheses for people who've lost a limb. You know, mechanical engineers can do that. You know, engineers help society a lot. You know, how do we really convey to kids what that is? And you know, for me, it certainly went back to when I was in elementary school. That's where I first, I think, started having these ideas of creating and innovating and things like that. So I think it's really important that we start giving kids at the elementary school level exposure to these kinds of things.
Sure, why not take the kids when they're at their most creative and
absolutely before we kind of beat it out of them in our education system, when we start thinking about, you know, how can kids do this? And there's a lot of things. I know you've been doing some work with elementary school kids and middle school kids as well with some NASA projects, but there are some opportunities for kids to do things called something like Engineering is Elementary, where they can read a story about a student, about Juan, who is in Mexico, and his family needs to get their produce to market, and they got to cross a creek. What are they going to do? So the kids learn a lot about, you know, there's opportunities there for kids to learn a lot of different things. You know, they can learn the culture of Mexico. They can learn about different materials that might be used to build a bridge. You know, their science can come in there. They learn about things like shapes, triangles. Why do we see truss bridges a lot? You know, it's because triangles are stable structures. We like to build with them. So starting to get the kids thinking about these kinds of things, and then thinking about the design cycle. You know, it's the idea of, I have a problem. What tools do I need to solve this problem? And then in solving that problem, when I get to an answer, is it the right answer? Am I done then? I'm not necessarily done. Is this really going to meet my need? Maybe not. Maybe I need to come back around that circle and look at my problem again and see if that's what I'm doing. So a lot of what we can do with younger kids, you know, people will say, oh, they can't learn engineering concepts. There are engineering concepts they can learn. They can also learn about the design cycle and start learning that early. So as they start to build their mathematics and science background and their engineering background, they know how to fit that right into the design cycle. So you can start them as early as elementary school.
Sure. So can you give us some other examples of some of the programs that you're running here at UMBC?
Yeah, so, you know, the engineering in the elementary school is something that I'm really interested in because I really believe that we need to engage kids by 4th and 5th grade in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to get them to move on through that pipeline and then choose ultimately to study science or mathematics or engineering at the university level. So we can implement these things in 4th and 5th grade. And another thing we do at UMBC, we're the partner for the first LEGO League. FIRST stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it was a group started by Dean Kamen many years ago. Dean Kamen invented the Segway. He's also created the stair climbing wheelchair. So he is someone who really thinks outside of the box. So with the first LEGO League, we take kids who are 4th grade through 8th grade. They learn how to program a robot that they have to build first. Then they have to have it meet a number of different challenges. Every year, First LEGO League comes out with a new challenge.
Give us an example. So.
It's been power puzzle. How are we going to supply all the power we need for our country? Clearly we can't do it just with fossil fuels, so what are we going to do? So there are things like they have to get the windmill started. Maybe they have to move a dam in place so they can now harness get hydroelectric power out of water that may be flowing fast through some turbines. So the kids have to actually do these activities on a 4 foot by 8 foot playing field, compete with their robot. But that's only one part of the whole thing. There are 3 other parts. They have to show that they can do good teamwork. Because if we know anything, we know now that some of our systems are so complex. Not one person can do it all. You need lots of different minds to bring things together. And you need diversity of thought. You need people who come from different backgrounds, who have different ways of approaching problems so that we can really create some of the best solutions that we've ever had. So these kids have to learn how to work in teams, and sometimes that's a challenge for them. But that's another piece of the competition. And there are 2 other pieces. There's a technical competition where they have to be able to explain to judges, why did you build your robot the way you did? Why did you program it to do this? And so we really start to learn, did these kids really figure this stuff out themselves? And they do. They're really fabulous. And then they have a research project associated with it. So when we're talking about Power Puzzle, we're talking about different types of energy sources. They needed to have researched an alternative energy source, for example. Maybe they researched it and went to their local Chamber of Commerce and talked to them about, what are you doing in your city to really take advantage of alternate energy so we're not continuing to deplete the resources that we have in our country. So there's lots, it changes every year what the competition is. There's been a lunar competition on Mars, which I'm sure you would find fascinating. And there are other types. We're talking about transportation this year. How are we going to move people around? You know, we have an aging infrastructure of roads and highways. Are we going to build an elevator to the moon? How are we going to get those folks to the moon, right? Because we're going to be living on the moon again. So engaging these kids in 4th through 8th grade, starting to think about these issues, starting to think about the innovation they need to come up with. How do we start getting those ideas in them early, then helping them to understand you can do this, but you need to get a little bit of background, you need some science, you need some mathematics to really kind of build your foundation in what you're doing. So we do the first Lego League here. We will have, you know, we have over 150 teams in Maryland this year. It's up from 100 last year, so it's a huge increase. We probably have one of the largest increases in the country. And we've had all-girl teams. They called themselves, one team was called the Gorgeous Geeks. And I always loved they wore these purple sunglasses, lime green shirts, purple across the front, and they were great. So we see all sorts of opportunities for Girl Scouts to get involved, for homeschool kids, for just after-school clubs.
And it seems like it's a serious time investment on the part of the kids.
It is. You know, they're talking about meeting a couple of hours a week at least to start designing and building these things.
Do the parents become involved as mentors, or is it teachers? Or?
And, you know, it varies place to place. Often you'll see a teacher who's a mentor. Sometimes it's a parent who wants to be engaged. Sometimes you'll see somebody who's with an engineering company who just really believes so much that this is our future, that they want to become engaged in this kind of activity, and so they begin working with the kids as well. And I think, and then we also have our undergraduates who will be mentors to teams, and that's a model I love, because I love that they can see our students who are studying engineering coming back and talking to them and kind of modeling what it's like to be an engineer. And I think that's a really wonderful model. Once kids complete FLL, they can move up. There are other high school versions. There's the first tech challenge and then the first robotics competition for those kids as they get older. So there's nothing that's going to eliminate them. They can continue to do this after they've started as middle school. And I think the other thing that I'm really excited about is Project Lead the Way. And that's a national organization that's created engineering curriculum for middle and high school kids. And starting this in middle school, they get exposure to different things. They get exposure to robotics. They get exposure to 3D design. So they get to use the kind of software that engineers in the field get to use, and they get to design things in 3D and then perhaps build them, perhaps rapid prototype them. So they get this exposure, I think, in the middle school, which really kind of prepares them to choose to take those classes in the high school. Kids can take 4 or 5 classes in the high school, and by the time they get to their senior year, they can actually get college credit in engineering for this capstone course that they're taking. And we've seen kids across the country coming up with marvelous ideas for their capstone. One young woman didn't like going to get into her cold car Well, instead of just having an auto start on it, she wired her cell phone up to it. So the cell phone would start the car, she would call her car, tell it to start, and then the car would call her back when it was up to temperature. So she didn't have to get cold. She was from northern, upstate New York, so it got very cold there. She didn't like to go out. So she had created this device as part of her capstone project. We have another young woman who is on the Maryland Eastern Shore, actually, big soccer player. Hates it when she comes off the field, it's been a muddy day. There's mud all over her cleats. She can't find any concrete, nothing to kind of beat it off. So she created a rubber device that would attach to the toe and heel, allowed the cleats to come through. She'd come off the field, pop this off, give it a fling, the mud's gone, she snaps it back on. She's ready to go back in the game. So this was I think it was a great idea to look at something that matters to the kid.
Right.
This is something that matters to me. How am I going to solve this problem? Right. And we're seeing kids all over the country starting to get patents out of their stuff, and these are the kids who are going to be our new STEM kids. These are the kids who are going to start filling these positions for innovation and thinking about entrepreneurship and how do we create things, how do we start to really gain more prestige in the world, go back to where we were when we were kind of the right. movers and shakers of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Well, I understand that Project Lead the Way is now in an increasing number of schools in every state in the nation.
Yeah, that's right.
They're growing rapidly, so you get the impression that school systems and the people who are making those decisions are welcoming engineering into the lower grades.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think it's easier for them to welcome it into the higher grades, in grades 7 through 12, because typically engineering is run through what we would call career and technology education, because it's a career. It's been more of a challenge to get it down into the middle schools or the elementary schools, but that's where it's so perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Because elementary schools, they have the capability of bringing everything together, and engineering is really just a combination of science, mathematics, some problem solving. Oh wow, and you know what? You need a little bit of English as well, because you've got to be able to communicate your ideas. Right. So you've got to be able to write about them. You've got to be able to read about what's going on. So, I think it's the perfect Renaissance degree these days. Some people say it's going to be. So I think moving it down to the elementary school really makes sense. But the challenge then becomes, some teachers are uncomfortable teaching this because they're not engineers. How would they be able to teach this? And that's where we've been able here at the university to start bringing in teachers and giving them some engineering content. They can actually take engineering courses as teachers. They don't have to have the same background necessarily that our engineers do, but they're getting some content there. And we're finding that they're really excited about this because it does provide that way of kind of connecting up everything they're doing. There's some school, I know there's a school in Texas that's an engineering school. It's an elementary school, and they teach everything from the engineering perspective. They're learning about their reading and writing, their vocabulary, all of that from that perspective. So I think the challenge is really to help people understand, certainly, what does STEM mean? Right. It's the idea of bringing together all of these disciplines. And I know you had coined the term STEMist.
So, yeah, we're all STEMists now, aren't we?
We're all STEMists now. And, the idea of stepping out of our towers, out of our stovepipes, and moving to the point where we're trying to teach these things together. Why do you need to go to math class to learn math? If you're working on this engineering project, you're going to have to do some mathematics with it, So what a great way for kids to be engaged and say, oh, I want to learn math. I need to know it to solve my problem here. Same with the science, wow, I need to know something about the geography of the area I'm going to, or learn something about the body. What do I need to know in order to develop these prosthetics? It's not as cut and dried as it used to be. Right. Folks as engineers, folks as scientists are really moving among a lot of different areas now. And I think we need to be preparing kids to be able to do that. We need to be preparing them with, the kinds of backgrounds they need, but the ability to kind of bring all this knowledge together and use that to be able to solve problems, to work with other people in different areas.
So teachers are so critical for kids when they're in school. especially when they're in elementary school. It's true all the way up even to college professors, but
Absolutely.
when they're young, it's very important. You want to tell us a little bit about what kind of STEM education opportunities we have for educators at UMBC?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So we've created a new pathway at UMBC. This is my personal favorite because it's about engineering, and we graduated our first engineering teacher this past year. And I think it's very exciting. We're one of the first, I guess, maybe second state in the country to be creating engineering teachers. And this young man, we kind of created a new program for him. So we prepared him with the engineering background he needs. And of course, with the engineering background, you get physics, you get chemistry, you get mathematics. We don't do as much biology, which is probably something we should do. And then you get all the education background to help you understand, how do I work with kids? You know, is there a psychology to the teenage mind? Some people would say no. But, you know, the idea of how do people learn? You know, how do I convey this information? You know, and certainly in the programs we run, when we're talking about engineering and how you teach engineering, we talk about this project problem-based learning environment, which the research all shows has a very big impact on how students learn. It engages them. They're more likely to retain the information that they learn when they're in the process. So we have this ability to create engineering teachers, but, you know, and that's great for the high school and middle school level, but what about those elementary school teachers? You know, often the elementary school teachers have backgrounds in English and social studies, and so they're a bit reluctant to dip their toe into the world of science and mathematics, and they do it, but they're not as happy about it. So we're creating a new program for elementary school teachers, preparation program, with a much stronger STEM background. So these teachers will be taking a little bit more science, a little bit more mathematics. They get to take an engineering class where they can learn about how to apply engineering principles to what they're doing. And I think that's really exciting. You know, I look forward to seeing a lot more of these teachers in the elementary schools and seeing all sorts of creative things coming out of there. And kids not being afraid of the word engineer and knowing that it's not the guy who drives the train, that there are other people who do engineering besides that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that group of kids kind of moving up through the ranks. And, you know, certainly if they're doing this engineering in the elementary school, they're going to start to challenge those teachers in middle school and high school and say, push me more. Where can I go now with this engineering?
Absolutely. Do you have anything else on the horizon that
let's see, what is on the horizon? You know, and a lot of what we do too, as we think about, you know, we're doing these great things in K-12, then our students show up at our doorstep at the university level, and they're used to now this project problem-based learning, and they step to UMBC and all, you know, universities, I would venture to say, around the country, and they step into Chemistry 101 or to Physics 101 or to into Mathematics 101, and they realize that it's being taught in this lecture type of mode. So what we're starting to see changing here at UMBC is really different ways of teaching at the university level for STEM. You know, we've seen the creation of the Discovery Center for Chemistry, where they're having to work in teams to better understand their content. You know, we've been doing it in engineering for a while because we believe in that project problem-based model. But, you know, there's still a lot of lecturing going on. And how do we engage kids and get rid of, well, move farther away from that lecture model and think about the way that people actually learn things and start teaching in that way, and really more facilitate the learning, not dump the learning in, but pull the learning out. So there's lots of exciting things to be done.
That sounds like a good image to maybe wrap up on.
I think it is.
I think it is. So thank you, Dr. Ann Spence, and thank you very much.
It was great to be here. Thank you.